How is it for you to be surrounded by a camera team when going climbing?
So it really depends on the video project that we are working on, and I think it's also really important to emphasize that not every single time I go climbing there's always a camera next to me. So when it's more like a documentary style, I'm working with 5 or 6 cameramen that I'm really good friends with, and most of the time it's like really they are documenting what's going on and I don't really have to stage anything. I basically just show up at the climbing crag, just start warming up the way I would be warming up anyway. Maybe my only extra task could be something like fixing a rope or something like that, but that's usually pretty easy. And then I just climb, and the only thing I have to say like to my camera guy, like, okay, 15 minutes before I give it a try, go up and set yourself into the fixed ropes. And I think working like that is not really annoying as long as I know my camera guys, they are really good friends, and it doesn't really influence my enjoyment of the climbing day that much. And there are certain situations, even though it is like that, it might really increase the pressure if you like stay together with the camera team many days and for one single project, which, for example, Project Wake was maybe this case that would be maybe slightly easier without the pressure, not because when you don't really know how many days it will take, if it's going to be this trip or not, it slightly increases the pressure. But I think even besides, like, we might speculate whether it is necessary for professional climbers to create these videos or not. For me personally, some routes are so important for me that it is really important and nice personal memory to have a video out of it, just for like myself. And yeah, there's definitely a few routes that I'm really happy that have been filmed. Not necessarily for showing the others, but because like for me it has a really personal value.
How do you manage to produce content on a regular basis with your busy schedule?
So I also always try to come up with a project that don't really collide with my climbing training and goals. So not necessarily we are producing content which we know could be maybe the most successful in terms of views, but I always try to push for the videos that, you know, I just show up at the crag, climb some nice looking route, and that's it, that's the video. And if it's like, especially historical route, for example, when there's like a history involved, we invite like the first ascensionist, I think that is like an added value that I'm maybe the most happy with, because it's not just like me showing climbing, but you tell the story which otherwise would be forgotten. But sometimes, yes, maybe we have a certain frequency in our mind that we would like to stick, and yes, I must admit that sometimes, you know, I'm just immensely focused on the training for the next coming competition, and we are thinking, okay, what is going to be the next video that we will do? And that's the situation which might not be that nice, but it's not that often.
Are there downsides of being so active and visible on social media?
I mean, it really depends if most of the work you do yourself, or in my case, that I have quite a few people working for me that does most of the job. My job is mostly just show up at the location and do the climbing and a little bit of talking, which over time it's just got easier and easier. So I think I just managed to find a balance that I think works really well for me, makes also the people working for me pretty happy, and we make the content which I don't think is cheesy, that has a certain quality and does a certain good for the climbing community. It has some added value, and that's really important. I'm not saying like all the videos, but some of the videos, especially that we produced this year, I'm really proud about doing them, and on the top of that, offering them for anybody to see on the YouTube.
Why did the differentiation of pink point and climbing and red point climbing got lost?
So many years ago, there was the red point. That was the time when you send the route and clipping all the quick draws inside. And pink point, when the quick draws are already in space. So let's imagine that all the routes back in the 80s were basically like vertical, and it made much more sense to like give it a try and clean all the quick draws after you give it a try, because it's easy to clean the quick draws. Whereas like if it's a big cave, it's just so much work to clean the quick draws after you try. So basically I think in most of the countries, if you ask like what ping point is, people don't really know, because basically sending route with the quick draws already in place is just considered as a red point, and I think it's logical. Certain routes makes almost no difference whether you ping point them or red point them. Certain routes makes a big difference, and I think it's just logical. I think it's still would be still good to differentiate between red point and ping point, but you know, saying like there has never been a red point of a 9B, the real red point, while clipping the quick draws is like, yes, in some routes it would not really change anything, and in some routes it would change a lot, but it just depends so much on the route itself. Also, if you think about the onsides, some people might still not really consider a proper onside when the draws are already hanging. Yes, I must admit it's so much easier if the quick draws are already hanging, but that's more, you can also say like it was an onside with clipping draws or onside ping point, but onside is more defined by not having any information, not seeing a video, not getting any advice, and that's how onside is defined. And yes, you can say I did it with placing the quick draws, and it's a bit harder for sure, but I think it just comes down to honesty, and if you claim I did this route, you should also say like the way you did it. But I think even in terms of onsiding, having the quick draws now, it's a regular practice that the quick draws are already hanging.
Would there be no 9C route if we still would be super strict about the initial definition of red point climbing?
So I think there are 3 9C at the moment, and I'm pretty sure that all 3 9C would be so much harder to climb if you have to clip your own quick draws. Mostly because all 3 9Cs are really long. I think for all 3 you would need around 25 quick draws, and quite a few of them would be like extended. So it would definitely be really annoying to try to like properly red point them, and all 3 of them are super steep. They're really difficult to clean all the quick draws after each attempt. So yeah, maybe the answer is yeah, I don't think we would see a 9C yet, but I don't really see much of a reason why people should even try to attempt to climb these routes in this way, because in this particular case it doesn't really make that much sense in my point of view. In some other shorter routes which are more vertical, it makes a bit more sense. And of course, when it comes, for example, to tread climbing, pre-placed gear is obviously out of question. It's like completely different, and nobody even questions that. Yeah, you can still climb a tread climb with pre-placed gear, but I don't think it really counts as a proper ascent. But I think the general consensus, like if you pinpoint a hard sport route, yeah, it's considered as a proper ascent.
Which ethical principles are important for you that should never be forgotten in our sport? Example, use of knee pads, chipping, clipping, rope for red point ascent, etc.
So for me, maybe the difference between ping point and red point doesn't really play such an important role, but there are very important ethical dilemmas that might not really be talked about nowadays, and that is pre-clipping multiple quick draws before you start. For the safety reasons, so many times it's not for safety reasons. I always try to just climb straight from the ground, unless like a certain route was defined as to be climbed with first or second quick draw pre-clip for some reason. It definitely makes some of the routes much easier, and it's something that, you know, I don't think should be accepted as easily as we are seeing nowadays. I think sport climbing, when people think about it now, should be like 100% safe, not really realizing, yes, we try to make it as safe as possible, but it will never ever be 100% safe. And yeah, climbing certain routes for the safety reasons in a different way, making it easier, because if you don't have to clip the first, second, or third bolt, you're just making it easier. You know, the clips are in certain routes, I think, part of the difficulty, and you, in my point of view, shouldn't really change that. The topic of knee pads, it's also very important. Knee pads are something that is a big of a help, but I think it's a natural evolution of the sport. And if a certain route is easier with the use of knee pad, yeah, that's downgraded. The problem is, like, if you climb a lot with the knee pad, your knee bar technique is also evolving. So if you climb for years with knee pads and then you decide, okay, I'm not going to use a knee pad, you're still making so many knee bars just because you learned how to place the knee bars. And yes, with shorts or jeans, they're not going to be as good knee bars, but they're still going to be usable. And in my case, if I just stop using knee pads, I will still use so many more knee bars than compared to 15 years ago, because knee pads are a great thing to practice. You practice, you do knee bars all the time, and that's how you improve in technique. Knee bars is a case of practice. It's like you have to do that to become really good. It's not some kind of wizardry or something like that. It's just like a technique, just like crimping or standing on a small edge. You just have to learn it, and that's how you get better. And I think if I turned back into the no knee pad climbing, it would be just so much about treating my skin on the thighs, and it wasn't fun. Like, I remember 10 years ago when I was not climbing with knee pads, I would be like sandpapering my knees for like a couple of weeks before the trip. And like basically every time I went climbing, hanging in a knee bar, I was like, should I really stay maybe 10 seconds more and risking that I completely bruise my knees and I'm not going to be able to knee bar for the next week or something like that? Once you have a knee pad, it's something like, the modern knee pads are so comfortable, I don't even know about them. And you kind of feel free, and you don't have to really think about whether you bruise your legs too much or not. But I think the grades should react sometimes on the use of knee pads, because yes, some routes are much easier. Certain routes I think make sense to climb without knee pad. I think Hubble, for example, is a perfect example. Like, if you have a knee pad, you can make a knee bar, which if you don't have a knee pad, it just doesn't work at all, because you need this rubber to increase the friction. So I think Hubble completely makes sense to climb without a knee pad, because that's the way that it was done. But other routes that have a certain knee bars that are completely possible to do without knee pad, it just hurts so much more. I think there it makes a sense to climb with a knee pad and maybe go for the lower grade. And I must say, yes, for some routes, it's a shame. Some routes with a knee bar are not really the same quality, because some routes used to be like super resistant, and all of a sudden with knee pads, there are some rests, and you know, the flow of climbing is not the same. But I think that's the life. Other ethical questions is more like, I think opening new routes, more like in the alpine style, or like more in the mountains, or more in the multi-pitch climbing. I think, for me, for example, I think it's completely acceptable that you open new routes from the ground, from the rappel. You need to clean them. Most of the sport routes are actually on the cracks with a really low quality rock, and it's no problem. But I think when you get to the multi-pitch climbing, I think it would be nice to stick to the traditional ethic of opening ground up, which is, I think, quite rare to see. When we are talking about multi-pitches, more like a sport style that are bolted and stuff like this. And that's something, yeah, I think 10 years ago it would be more like just accepted that you should go and open it ground up. Now it's more like accepted that you can bolt from the rappel. And also there's the chipping holds, which I thought, again, like 10, 15 years ago, that was something that people thought of it, that's a thing of the past. And I feel it's like coming back, and people don't really discuss it, just, yeah. it's kind of easy to make a nice route, chipping a few holes, especially if it's like a low quality rock, which is really soft. You can make it in a way that it's not completely obvious. So we are not talking about like pocket letters back from the 80s when it was just like this and it was completely obvious. But the chipping nowadays is a bit more less visible, a bit more secret. It is, if you have an experience, in some cases it's completely visible, and some of these routes are total classics, and people don't talk about it at all, that these routes are chipped. And I think that's a shame. People should be more honest and just not pretend that all the routes that we are climbing are natural, even though they are not. I have my own ethics when it comes to bolting new routes. I definitely use a Sika. I do reinforce holes, and 10 years ago I would be so much more purist, but I think over time I gain more experience that if a certain hold should fall off, it's better to either break it or reinforce it so it kind of stays the same for many years. But then there's also like question like what you should actually reinforce. If like a flake is like you touch it and it breaks, I don't think it's a hold you should reinforce. I think you should just break it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. My favorite Mammut product is Sender Light Harness and Masone Light Pants. Both of these products makes you feel like when you're climbing that you're wearing nothing and you feel really free.
What's your next big project?
I would say there are some small projects that I have in my mind for the next few weeks, but I definitely want to come back for Project Big, which now after the first ascent of Jakob Schubert is just big.